Yeah, that's right. Bow.
Comedian Sean Boyd from Just Therapy, the podcast. I got to talk to you about Detroit Auto Parts. They're the official parts store of Redline Radio. They have two convenient locations, one on the east side. You can call 216-531-7373, or the west side, 216-398-7373. Don't forget to mention Redline Radio and you receive 10% off your purchase. Make sure you hit up Detroit Auto Parts. Check them out.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl Jess from She Vibes, and I just want to give a shout out to Wiggins Construction and Home Improvement. They service bathrooms, kitchen, windows, door siding, and much, much more. Please contact Will today at 440-731-7654. Don't forget to tell them that Redline Radio sent you. Also, don't forget to tune in to She Vibes every Wednesday, 7 p.m. EST.
What's poppin', y'all? It's your girl Shy from She Vibes, and Growing Wings Adult Services is the official sponsor of the State of the Art Studio 2. Growing Wings Adult Services have 5 years of experience of taking care of adults with disabilities. For more information, call Lisa at 234-334-7547. And don't forget to tune in to She Vibes on Wednesdays, 7 p.m. EST.
What's up, y'all? It's your girl Jess from She Vibes, and Detroit Auto Parts is the official parts store of Redline Radio. They have two convenient locations on the east side, East 200th Street. You'll call 216-531-7373, or the west side, Pearl Road, at 216-398-7373. Mention Redline Radio and receive 10% off your purchase. And always remember, it's definitely a vibe.
Come and catch a vibe with the girls, Jess and Shy. We gon' talk that shit and we gon' bring it to you live. It's a She Vibe, raw and uncensored. If you a little bitch, then don't bring your feelings with you. It's a She Vibe. It's a She Vibe. It's a She Vibe. Come and catch a vibe with the girls, Jess and Shy. It's a She Vibe. It's a She Vibe. Real, raw, uncut, and we live. She Vibes. Hey, what's poppin'? It's the girl She Vibes. We in the building another Wednesday.
Yes.
We got Precious on the ones and twos.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got a good episode today. We got a special guest in the building. So we about to be lit. We about to get it in. So, of course, before we start the show, we're gonna shout out some of our official sponsors. We got Ashe's Health and Wellness. Whether you need help growing a six-figure business, managing your personal daily schedules, just as simple as being dehydrated, house chores, you can reach out to Coach Lauren. That's on IG. You can reach out to Coach Lauren at gmail.com. Also, if you sign up today, you will receive 45 minutes for free for a virtual chat. Yep. And then you can also find them on Ashe's Health and Wellness on Facebook. We also got Custom Superstore. They are a superstore. They just opened up back in August. You know, they got custom apparel. They got paintings. They do logos, family portraits. They got an art gallery. They lit over there. So you can check them out at 7976 Broadview Road. And that's Broadview Heights, Ohio 44147. You can also follow them on Instagram, UULU. And 216-640-6181. We also got Sistar Circle, which they are a sisterhood where you share resources, information, and insights. Their goal is basically to encourage you to share your shine and then, share your knowledge with others and help them to be able to share their shine. You can reach out to them at www.shinesistar.com. They got a couple events coming up. So look out for that, and we'll show some flyers for those a little later. We also have SK's Creations of Love. SK's Creations of Love is an ambiance and romantic rendezvous concierge business for all of your intimate occasions, special occasions, birthdays, anniversaries, wedding nights, all that good stuff. You can hit us up at 216-703-4967. SK's Creations of Love on IG, on Facebook, on Twitter, all that good stuff. We also got Park Play and Park, and they are a entertainment company for all your children parties and events. You can get them at parkplayandparty.com. That's Park Play and Party on Facebook and on IG. They also have a few events coming up, so y'all gonna check that out a little later. And then last but not least, All She Know Is Hustle. All She Know Is Hustle is a custom apparel business. Anything you need customized for your business logos, or you just want decorative pillows, you can reach out to them over there at 216-386-2148, or you can email her at entrepreneurherdream@outlook.com. Hey, shout out to y'all. Thank y'all so much for y'all support, being a sponsor. We appreciate it. Thank you. And what we got going on for the rest, for the week?
So, every Thursday night, you got the Lex Vegas Show starting at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Go ahead and check them out. Following right after, you got Club Pizzle with Don P. He comes on at 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Then you got Broad Street South. They are from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. And then finally, Money's Crazy Soundtrack. He is with Redline Radio LLC exclusive. He comes on from 10 p.m. to midnight. So make sure you check out those shows. Redline Radio is lit. Make sure you check them out.
We got a lot of things going on over here. So how has your day been, Jess? What your Wednesday looking like?
Wednesday was cool. I didn't have to work today.
I'm
feeling good.
You was chilling, you was sleeping and shit,
among other things. But I had a good Wednesday. It was a good Wednesday. Okay, how about you?
My shit was cool. My starter on my car went out, so I'm driving a work truck, picking kids up. They want to play in the back of the shit, don't want to sit down and shit like that. So my son opened up the motherfucking car door while we driving on the freeway.
Oh my god!
I'm like, what the fuck did you do? Get your ass in the back! Oh my god! So that was kind of crazy. No kids was hurt in the process. You
have to tie their asses down.
Okay, shit.
Everybody get down,
man. But other than that, it was cool. I made it here on time.
That's right.
Thanks to you. So it was good. So man, we got a nice show today, Jess. Man, I don't know if they ready for this, man.
Yeah, it can get a little heavy.
It can get intense.
But they need it.
It's necessary. It's definitely necessary. All right, well, we got a special guest in the building today.
Up, Dave?
Hey, what up, Dave? What's popping? What's going on, man? So yes, we got a special guest in the building. She is a grief recovery method specialist. She's a spirit teacher, and she's also a life coach. So we would like to introduce Miss April Owens. Hey. What's going on, lovely? Yes, we good. We chilling. How you doing? Okay, you was telling me a little about your day earlier. Yeah, because it is necessary.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, we got childhood trauma and mixed in with a little grief recovery. So I think this is gonna be real dope. So we just gonna jump right in then. So my first question would be, why do you think or feel that it's hard for people to confront? No. Let me run that back. How do you identify childhood trauma?
How do you identify it? So for a long time, there really wasn't a way. And I'm actually glad you asked it like that, because I'm not sure if you're familiar with TED Talks.
I am. I'm familiar with TED Talks.
Yeah. So one of the most powerful TED Talks I've ever seen was one done by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. She's in California.
Okay.
And she talked about something called ACEs.
Okay.
And I'm going to read something to you, but it's a complete quote from Dr. Nadine Ray's, the intro to her TED Talk about childhood trauma.
Okay.
So in the mid 1990s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 causes of leading death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. People that are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease, lung cancer, and 20-year difference in life expectancy. Wow. It is not a pesticide or a packaging chemical, but it's childhood trauma. We're not talking about losing a basketball game or failing a test in school and being completely heartbroken. We're talking about threats that are so severe to us in childhood or pervasive that it literally gets under our skin and literally changes our physiology. Okay. So these are things like abuse or neglect or growing up with a parent with mental illness or substance dependence. So a study was created by Dr. Vince Folletti at Kaiser and Dr. Bob Anda at the CDC called ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And many healthcare providers are actually using this right now as an assessment tool. So for example, where I work in the day, I work with prenatal moms. So as soon as they come to their new OB visits, that's, one of the things we try to give them if they express some things going on in their social environment. Well, let's see what their ACEs is like. If they had adverse childhood experiences that might be affecting her situation now.
Wow.
Yeah. So they did a study. They asked 17,500 adults about their adverse childhood experiences, which would include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness or substance dependence, incarceration, parental separation, divorce, or domestic violence. 67% of adults had at least one, and 12% had 4 or more.
Wow.
Okay, so here is the big kicker to all of that, actually. It was found on a scientific level, exposure to childhood trauma affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive functioning, which is a critical area for learning. And on MRIs, these physicians were able to see a measurable difference in the amygdala, which is the brain's fear response center. So that lets you know just how detriment childhood trauma goes. It literally causes brain damage.
Wow. And I know, just with you being a mental health specialist, do you see that? Are some of your clients, does a lot of their stuff stem from childhood trauma?
Yes, we actually have a unit for children. Like our youngest patients can be as young as 6, going for the child, going up into adolescence until they're 17. So when you said something about impulses, like most people who suffer with childhood trauma, they're very impulsive. So I can see that. I can see that with my patients, not even just children, but in adulthood as well. They just act. So that was very interesting.
Right.
Sure.
Wow. Yeah, that's deep.
And adults, you typically don't know that there's been childhood trauma unless it's spoken of. The child says something in childhood, or the adult is ready to say something.
Right.
Okay. But typically, most people become so numb to the pain of what happened, they don't even know that it's there anymore. Right. But what happens is subconsciously, it is always acted out in their relationships. Family relationships can be one, friendships, co-workers, but mostly romantic relationships is where they're going to act it out. And a lot of times they act out a lot of sexual traumas in their sex life. So a lot of times that will dictate what a person actually likes sexually and what they don't like because of a trauma. And that's actually a filter. So it's like you don't even know what you like.
Right.
You understand?
That's how you know it's what
know,
you was introduced
I know
to.
a young lady, like she is in the adult industry now. Like she does like lingerie, you know, showing her body and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember she came out with a story saying that she had been raped by these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people didn't believe her because of what she does now.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, she probably just, you know, was giving it up freely. And it was like, I was like, no, she probably could have actually gotten raped. Like,
cause it's like when you a child and you introduced to something, that's the first thing you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you know, you go off what you know. That's even with, you know, experiences, you know. If you have certain experiences, that's the first thing you know. So it's like that becomes kind of like a automatic type of thing. It's in you, is what you know. All kids, they only do what they know, what they shown, what they learned, and do travel through adulthood. But that's crazy, like how deep that affects your body in general.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it causes
you know,
brain damage. You know,
Wow.
when you introduce something to the body and to the hormonal system that the body was not ready for, it causes all kinds of signals to go haywire, and they stay that way. I'll give you a good example. So, you know, a lot of women have there's a stereotype that if we're assaulted in childhood, there's molestation, sexual abuse, whatever, you know, we acted out sexually, we become loose and, you know, or we become so isolated and so timid and afraid of sex, we don't want anything. You know what I mean? On the side of the men, how many men do you know that was introduced to sex too soon by a family member?
Yeah.
So in my generation, you know, men in their 40s, I meet a lot of men who their uncle literally gave them a woman for their 12th birthday, or their uncle gave them a woman when they turned 10. Right. They were getting oral sex at 9 because their big cousin gave it to him as a gift.
Right.
Can you imagine? And then maybe he can't get that again for a very long time. Maybe till he's a teenager. Now he's trying it again. You awaken this 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old boy, and then nothing's going on. That he turns 13, 14, 15. He goes and gets it himself. Can you imagine his view of women, sex, the signals that's going, like everything is all just confused now.
And they think that's the way of life.
Yeah, he doesn't understand how to appreciate sex. He doesn't understand how to appreciate a woman. He's typically never satisfied. And sometimes women can do that too. We go from person to person to person because we're trying to numb a pain that can never be numbed that way. It has to be addressed.
I think that also go with too, like say if they grow up in an abusive environment, it can go that way too. They think that's how life supposed to be. They think that that's how you solve problems, by, you know, physically handling somebody, you know, like, you know, being in that toxic situation. And, you know, that's so true. Like, I think that's why it's so important for people to dig into what and why they are the way they are, why they get so angry, why they get so, you know.
It's a stigma about mental health, especially in the African American community. And I think it stems from the fact that we were taught to be strong. So if we point out any weakness, then it's like we failed in a way. So I feel like a lot of times people just want to, okay, well, I'm just going to forget about that, or at least try to bury it as much as possible. But like you were saying, subconsciously it comes up. And people don't even have the recognition sometimes until it's too late. So,
and that's the next question too. Why you think adults are so afraid to confront that? You were saying that they may feel some type of way, like, you know.
I think it has a lot to do with being uncomfortable. A lot of people don't want to be open about things that might have happened. They don't want to open those old wounds. They don't want to have that self-reflection time because it's not pretty. It's not a pretty situation. It can get ugly. So they don't want to have that because they don't want to open up those old wounds. So I think that has a lot to do with fear. It has a lot to do with people not wanting to talk about it or bring it up.
You think so? So you think that's the main reason?
That's that fear.
Why people don't want to confront it.
And then sometimes when you open up something like that, you have to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
And when you start telling that truth, that means might have to expose somebody.
Right.
most people don't have to, but some people may end up having to actually confront their abuser. That confrontation may cause other people to know what's really going on. And so they become afraid of that confrontation as well. Like, if I say what's really going on, then I'm going to have to tell the truth about somebody in my family that everyone truly loves.
Right.
And that's going to devastate. And then are they even going to believe me? There's a fear right there.
You
know?
Absolutely. I've heard so many stories from like some of my younger patients, and they'd tell me like, I told my mom, or I told, my family members about what was going on, and they didn't believe me. Nobody believed me. So it's just like,
that's just like recently my daughter. So she was having some issue with a teacher in school, and she was getting in trouble. And I'm talking to her the other day, like, you can't be doing this, you can't be doing that, blah, blah, blah. So she just broke down in the car, like, just started crying. And I'm just like, and she crying, and she got her notebooks. I taught her to write, your feelings down in your journal. And so she just back there going, and she crying, and I'm like, Detrimental, like, what is wrong with you? And she like, my teacher, and she say all these negative things to us, and she say she get happy when we upset, and she just be so hard on us, and she just telling me all types of stuff. And I'm just like, well, why you never said this to me? Like, why you never let me know that this teacher is, causing this issue, not with her, just with her, but for the class. She said, I didn't think you would believe me. I said, yeah. I said, no, like, you're my child, like I said, anytime that we talk, because I'm the type of parent that if my kids is doing something in school, if I'm being told something, I'm not just going to automatically jump down their throat. I'm going to come at you like, okay, what happened today? I got a call. Let me know what's going on. Why was this happening? Why was that happening? This same teacher was on the phone with me telling me about some stuff she was doing. There was a period of time where she was saying she was sleeping in class. And I'm like, okay, well, I can explain that. We got a situation. She, siblings, we trying to move. She ain't in her own room. So that could be a situation. She didn't get in trouble for that.
Right.
I just told her we're going to try to figure something out. She can get some sleep. I was telling her, like, I'm on your side, like, I'm not just going to be like, oh, you said this and that's not true. Like, don't ever be afraid to talk. Don't ever be afraid to say something. And I think that's very important, because as a child, I was afraid to say a lot of things, which I do understand that as I got older, I was timid, I was shy, I didn't want to speak my opinions. It was traumatic. That was traumatic. Like, and that's another thing I was going to say, like, is there levels to trauma? Like, because we talking about the examples we did just mention was very traumatic. That's the sexual abuse, that's the abusive homes and things like that. But is it actually levels to this, to where it can be just the smallest simple thing, but it affected a child in a certain way? Could that be a trauma? Could that be something that
it just depends on how they received it?
Right.
What may be traumatic to one person may not be traumatic to someone else, because our perceptions of things is different.
Right.
I will say that childhood trauma can run a little bit more deep, and it can have a little bit more severe effects and outcomes because it festers for so long.
Okay, so why do you think childhood trauma is so detrimental?
Because your childhood is your foundation. That's where you begin. It shapes everything of who you are and who you're going to become. And so if who you are supposed to be gets tainted by another adult's dysfunction, you kind of come out the gate lacking. As far as who you truly are. You come out the gate with a fear that you didn't need to have. You come out the gate with a distrust that you didn't need to have. You don't know how to connect with people in a healthy way. You don't know how to resolve conflict in a healthy way.
Right.
You see people that just get mad and they just get angry and they just throwing stuff and they just, usually these are people that saw a lot of conflict in their environment as a child, but they never saw the resolution.
Right.
They just saw doors slamming, people leaving, glasses going. They heard somebody that got stabbed on the porch. That's all they know, but they don't know how it was resolved. So they don't know how to conflict resolution.
They don't know how it was
They know how to get mad.
Yeah.
But when you try to work through things and communicate to work something out, it's almost impossible. They don't know how to resolve conflict. So, those of us that are parents, when we have our children and our children may overhear an argument or a disagreement, it is so important that they see the resolution. It is so important that they see you apologize to one another after that is over, so that they can start to mimic that behavior. Like, okay, so this happened, I need to apologize if I did something wrong. It's okay to talk to this person if we don't have to push and pull and fight, and you know what I'm saying?
What's up, Tim? But yeah, I was talking to somebody about that too, because we were having a conversation, and I say I apologize to my kids. Like if it's a situation to where I was wrong or I might have jumped the gun or something, I apologize to them. Like, I apologize. I was wrong. I didn't, see everything through. I feel like a lot of people feel like because they're the parent,
right, that they don't owe that.
They don't owe their child an apology, and that can mess them up, because they can grow up to be adults who don't apologize or who don't come to a proper resolution, like you were saying. So yeah, it's important that you apologize to your kids if you're wrong.
It teaches them how to communicate. Like most people don't even know how to
Right.
communicate effectively, say how they feel. But when you apologize, the times that you apologize to your kids, that could lead, practicing that could lead into another conversation about something else. But you're teaching them how to communicate effectively, how to speak to people. Even when you're angry, how to express yourself when you're like, fuck this shit.
Right.
It's okay, but it's how you say it. And, sometimes you got to be careful who you're talking to.
Exactly.
And giving them a voice. I think not having a voice is traumatic too.
Yeah.
Like you just getting shut down. Your parents don't want to hear that shit.
People who usually are timid during childhood, they either carry that on into adulthood, or they are people who are explosive in adulthood because they didn't get the opportunity to speak in their childhood. So now they're like, I'm grown, I'm about to say whatever
Right,
it is
whatever the fuck I want to
They
say.
don't have any type of
I know somebody,
boundaries.
he was like, I ain't no kid no more. I do whatever the fuck I want. I used to be
Like,
I used to be looking at him like, damn, bro.
But
You got some underlying issues
I
there.
can say that I went through that. I was, raised by a single mom, and she was 16 when she had me. So she only did what she knew how.
Y'all was growing together.
So, no shade to mom, but she didn't know. But I grew up in a house where children are to be seen and not heard. You're not supposed to ask questions. You're not supposed to let nobody know what's going on in my house. Don't you tell those teachers or those doctors what's going on in my house. Don't you tell those people at church who's sleeping in my bed. You know what I'm saying? Like we weren't allowed to speak. So when I became an adult, I actually went towards the way of being afraid of confrontation. It took me many, many years to be okay with confronting people.
Yeah.
I was afraid of arguments. I didn't like arguments. I would
Me too.
run from them. I would avoid them. Now, try me if you want to.
Right.
But it took many, many years for me to get to that point.
You had to relearn
up,
that shit. You
to
had
learn
to
to speak
teach
up.
yourself. Like, and that be the thing too. A lot of kids with the childhood trauma, if they do decide to do the work, if they do decide as an adult to, try to turn it around, it is work. It is work, because it's like you gotta relearn this shit all over again for yourself. The world is teaching you, like.
I like to give an example that I got from the Grief Recovery Handbook when we talk about the childhood part of it. And this is just an example of how important it is to know how to deal with trauma, how to recover yourself from any emotional loss or major change in life. So as kids, for example, you say like your child has a goldfish. Child goes to school, they come home, the goldfish is dead. Oh my God, your son or your daughter, she's crying like, oh my God, my fish is gone, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, what is the first thing we typically say as parents?
Right. We'll get you another one.
We'll get you another one, right? So that child has experienced a loss. But what we just did is we just programmed our children to believe that when I lose something, I have to immediately replace it.
Right.
And what happens is we get in relationships later on and we don't know how to be single. As soon as we lose a person through a breakup or what have you, we don't take time to learn from the relationship, so we don't repeat the same mistakes. We go right out and get somebody new because we can't handle being by ourselves for a little bit. But a lot of times we're programmed that way in childhood. That's how you deal with a loss. You just replace it. And that's not true. What we need to tell our children is, I'm so sorry your fish died. I know you're upset. What do you want to do about it? And let me know if you need to talk.
And you know what? I use that tactic because I went through grief recovery with you, and we're gonna talk a little more about that a little later in the show. But my daughter, my oldest, she had a bunny. Now this bunny, he was cool, but I ain't know that bunny shit all goddamn day. Like I didn't know the upkeep of bunnies, and I'm like, look, baby, like this is a lot. Then at that, we didn't really have the proper space for the bunny, So like ahead of time, I told her like, hey, we probably gonna have to get rid of this bunny because for one. When you leave and go to your pappies, you be gone for a minute, and we may check on them here and there, but to be honest with you, so much going on in the house, we forget that he there, and I'm just like, I feel like he needs to be in a better position. So maybe a couple weeks went by, and she came home one day, he was gone. And she just had a meltdown. I thought I had more time, and she was watching YouTubes of bunnies and stuff like that. And I'm just like, oh my God. I'm like, I went over there and talked to her, and I remembered the grief recovery process. And I'm like, instead of me saying like, well, later down the line, we're going to get you another one. I just tried to explain to her, like, you see how these bunnies on TV, how they got all this space where they at. You see how they in the environment where they can run around, they can do this and they can do that. And we don't have that, right. Like he just needed a better place. Like instead of saying that, oh, we get you another one, I was just basically letting her know like this was the best for him. I understand that letting go, that's hard, but you want to do what's best for the bunny's interest, so it kind of like helped a little bit. And I just kept that in the back of my mind, like just to be aware of how I'm talking to her, what I'm saying, because that is traumatic for a little kid to lose something like that they had dear to them.
Away.
I know.
That was her baby.
Right? So yeah, man, that is definitely something. Do you feel like, as far as childhood trauma, do you feel there's a difference in a way from adulthood trauma? Like, is one more detrimental than the other, or like,
I would say, they're both very detrimental. However, I'm going to say childhood traumas can give you more severe outcomes because they last so long. Those are the ones that get rooted in you, right. Like literally rooted in you. Trauma as an adult still can be devastation. However, it's not something that literally reprogrammed your brain, reprogrammed your mind.
Yeah.
And you kind of knew who you were before the trauma, and you can kind of try to work your way into healing yourself back, re-indemnify yourself, so to speak. But in childhood, you didn't get a chance to even figure that out yet.
Right. You didn't even know how to process it. Yeah.
Right. Before the brain experienced that disruption. So I'm going to say childhood trauma can be a little bit more severe. It literally affects your physical health later.
All right, we're gonna get into some more with Miss April Owens. We're gonna take a break, and we're gonna give y'all some events that's going on in the city. Shout out some more of our official sponsors on the station. So stay tuned. We'll be back.
going on? We back, baby.
All right, man. Y'all make sure y'all go out and support some of these events that's going on in the city. Shout out to Drippy Dez on the track. You know, she an upcoming artist in the city. So look her up, check out her music and everything. So
yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get into some official sponsors for Redline Radio. We have All Access Realty. So if you or your family is thinking of buying new or selling your home or business, or if your business is looking to upgrade, you can contact Frank at All Access Realty. He's a veteran who served for our country, and he is now serving the community. Frank is committed to helping our veterans. So if you know of any housing opportunities for vets, please contact Frank today at 440-391-7430, or you can email him at franks@allaccessrealty.com. We also got Incredible Keepsakes. They are responsible for t-shirts, cups, binders, keychains, you name it. Incredible Keepsakes can make and customize it for you. They are the official merchandise provider for Redline Radio LLC and our show host. So you can give them a call at 440-242-9648, or you can go to their website at www.incrediblekeepsakes.com. And as Diane would say, cherished moments are made to last forever.
Hey, I always love that part. I'll be waiting for that part.
Okay.
Finally,
we got Pit Road Diecast. They're specializing in all current and past NASCAR diecast and model car kits. So for all of your diecast needs, call 216-355-2347. If you mention Red Live Radio, you'll receive 10% off your in-store purchase. So make sure you contact those sponsors for us. I'm sorry, I started reading the comments on the.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh shit, what happened?
What up, Sean? We're talking about childhood trauma.
What's going on, man? So yeah, we about to jump right back into it, man. This is a great conversation because a lot of people don't understand that the things that you go through as a child really does affect who you are as an adult. And if you don't confront that shit and deal with it, you're gonna have a hard time until you choose to. You know, like you're gonna have some stakes in the road until you choose to really deal with that. And that brings me into my next question, which would be how does a person even begin to address childhood trauma? Like how would you?
So how does a person begin to address childhood trauma?
Yeah. What's that process like?
Honestly, the process to address childhood trauma is different for everybody. You know, I can only tell you what it took for me.
Bring your mic up
just
a little bit, yeah. So they can hear you. Yeah.
So, you know, how does a person begin? I can only share my experience.
Okay.
What it took for me to get to that awareness that I need to dig into something. Mm-hmm. But the process to getting to that point is kind of different for everybody. Mm-hmm. A lot of times life events have to come about to kind of trigger you to feel that way. Many times it's a major loss. Mm-hmm. Something happened. So for example, when my mom passed away, it was such a major change and monumental moment in my life. It kind of, shook me. So I had to be like, wait a minute. You know, when you're sitting still like that, you're trying to understand like, okay, the only constant I've ever had in my entire life from birth till now is gone. Right. Mm-hmm. So who am I now? What do I do now? How do I act now? How am I going to be around my family now? You know, and so when you start having those thoughts, you just come to that realization like, okay. And then you just kind of start thinking like the things that she taught me. Mm-hmm. And I started feeling like, but was that really correct? You know, so it just depends on what it takes, something different. Like for you, when you came to me and said, I'm going to do grief recovery, something else was going on with you that made you come to that acceptance and awareness. Like, okay, I need to go ahead and just walk through this. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't the same as it was for me. Right. You know, I had a situation where I had many losses back to back to back. And had I not known how to do grief recovery, I probably wouldn't be here.
And that's what I was gonna ask. That's another question too. Do you feel like trauma equates losses? Like is they one and the same?
Not all the time.
Not all the time. Okay.
Because as far as what I want to clear up is grief recovery handles any loss, any major life change. However, when you go
give some
that
examples,
process,
give them some examples.
I'm gonna give you some.
Okay.
However, though, when you go through the process, you're gonna eventually have to go back to your childhood a little bit, and you saw how we did that together. Even though we were handling something going on now, I still had to take you back, right? So we do handle childhood trauma in grief recovery, but some major changes are not traumatic. For example, losing a job, or not losing a job, but maybe resigning and going to another company, changing jobs. So like you work somewhere for 5 years and you got a good job. It's paying more and everything. But because, you leaving that job that you was at for 5 years, like this was your life for the last 5 years. This was your routine. And so leaving that, even though what you're leaving it for is something good, is actually still a loss. Right. All your coworkers you won't see anymore, all the friendships, even the bad moments, like you have to separate yourself from a way of being. And now you have to learn how to, act in this new environment. That's actually a loss. Let's say you and a best friend fall out. You're not speaking anymore. That's a loss. That's a loss. Moving. When I went from Ohio to Nevada, that was a loss because I didn't know anything but Ohio. Right. And so I had to leave behind an emotional tie to a place, because we have our emotional ties to places. And that's why some people will never leave their city, because they're just that emotionally tied to it, so losses like that, you can, losing a pet or something like that. Relationships, breaking up. It don't have to be a divorce. It could just be a breakup. And most people don't think that these things I'm going to mention are losses, but they are. Getting married, that's not traumatic, but it is a loss, especially if you've been single for quite some time. And especially for our men, a lot of men are not provided that emotional safety to truly say how they feel. Right. They don't have the emotional space to say, I do love this woman and I am ready to make this step, but I do feel kind of bad about leaving my old life behind. That's a loss. His loss of lifestyle. Now I'm accountable to somebody else.
I had a coworker, and she just recently got married, but she still had a separate bank account. And that caused, like, they were in couples counseling before and after they got married. And that was causing like a friction in their marriage, because he's like, I'm giving you all the access to my accounts and everything like that, but you have this separate account. I don't even know how much is in it. I don't know. Like, why do you have it? Is it a fear that you planning an escape from me? Like, what's going on? So what she said, her rebuttal was, well, what my dad said to me was, always have your own account. And I'm like, your dad? When did he say that to you? Like, you 50 something years old. You still holding on to something that your dad said when you was 13, 14 years old. And it stuck with her. And it took her a minute to let go of that old account. But she finally gave him access to it or whatever. But that's just so funny that you said that, because she got married. They love each other. They're happy. And it's just like that one thing that she was holding on to, what her father had taught her, was carrying on throughout her marriage. Yeah. And it was just,
and that is major. In grief recovery, there are over 40 life events that cause loss. Having a baby for the first time, second, third, fourth, that is a loss, especially when it's your first one.
I can attest to that, because before I start, I mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to slide that in. Like, I can definitely say in my experience, before I was having children, I was, performing. I was doing music. I was just living my life how I wanted to. I was moving like that. And when I started having children, it was like, okay, now your time is limited. Now you can't just go and do this. Now you can't just going through that. It's kind of like I had to become this different person almost immediately, and I didn't know how to process that. Like that was really, really, really hard to understand that. Like, so yeah, it was like a loss because it was like I can't be the person that I was anymore because now I have another responsibility and another person that I have to be. So yeah,
it's a happy occasion
yeah,
to become a parent, but it's a loss in a way, a loss of freedom, a loss of finances. If you're married or you're with your significant other, it's a loss of intimacy between the two of you. A little bit. You're going to have to work a little bit extra harder on your relationship once you have a child. You know what I'm saying? So even something like that can be a loss. Not necessarily traumatic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So
okay, but I ain't even gonna lie to you. I feel like, in a way, I guess for me, looking at trauma versus losses, in a way, I feel like sometimes they can run on the same line because that loss could have been traumatic. It could have been, it could have been
Most
so
of them are.
severe to where you like, dang, man, it's just affecting you and it's just, just prolonging, it's just following you. So I would feel maybe in some situations they can run hand in hand.
Because you have death. Death is always the number one.
Right.
You have divorce.
Yeah.
You have changing. I had experience of changing the custody of children.
Yeah.
Like all these things. If you're in a car accident, goodness forbid any of us, but if you're in a car accident and now you can't function the way you used to, that's very traumatic. Someone you loved and they said they love you. After 5 years or 10 years, all of a sudden they haul off and punch you dead in the face.
Yeah.
That's a
loss and trauma.
Immediately.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
with the grief recovery, what is grief recovery exactly? And what goes into grief recovery? Because I know a lot of people touch on get therapy, talk to a counselor, but I've never heard of grief recovery until I did it with you. Like I've never heard of that term. I never knew of that process. So, explain to us what that actually is and how it even differs from seeing a therapist or going through that type of process.
Okay. So it's funny because the grief recovery method has actually been around for like 20 some years. So before I go into the deep answer to that, let me take you back a little bit. Okay. So many moons ago, and I'm a preacher's kid.
BK.
I was a preacher's kid. So I used to go to church.
Rest in heaven, Auntie Bev. Right. Shout that out.
So I do not attend church now. I'm more on the spiritual aspect of it. However, I did have a foundation in religion. Okay. And so I used to do ministry. Okay, many years ago. And in this particular church, when you wanted to participate in ministry, the pastor required you to take grief recovery first. Okay. Why? Because hurt people hurt other people. And we don't necessarily intend to, but we're going to if we have not healed ourselves. Right. And so he did not want anyone touching someone in ministry to possibly re-traumatize them unknowingly. So deal with your stuff first before you can help anybody else. Definitely. Right. So he was a firm believer in that. So I took the course after church. And so I remember sitting down with one of the elders and he said, the number one rule in here is we do not mention God. We do not bring religion in here. Even though you're taking grief recovery in a church, you do not speak about God at all. This is an emotional journey. It is not a spiritual or religious one. Okay. Even though we're in church, some things are not always spiritual. Some things are mental, some things are emotional. So you cannot use spiritual tools all the time for an emotional deficit or a mental issue. We can take all our mental issues to Jesus all we want to, but if that person needs medication, they need medication. God and the therapist. You understand what I'm saying? God and the therapist. Right. I tell people that all the time. Right. So I appreciate that. And he said, because some people in here may actually be mad at God. For someone that might have passed away, or a relationship that ended, a child might have passed away. Some people may be angry at God. So we're not going to take that away from them. So we're not going to speak about it. We're not going to make this about prayer or anything like that. Right. So that's the first thing about grief recovery. But what it is, so I remember taking the course. I'm going to take the course. I finished it. It was like 12 weeks. And I remember sitting back like it was, besides childbirth, this was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. At that point, it got harder, but at that point, that was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I was like, wow, it teaches you how to heal yourself. So it takes you on a journey. I'm gonna give you a formal definition of grief recovery, but it does take you on a bit of a journey. But it was like, it's life changing.
Her mic.
It's life changing. But I remember looking at my children like, thank goodness I learned this now while they were still young, because I would have continued to repeat patterns on my children that was given to me that were incorrect. You know, so this has been around.
That's what they call them generational curses.
Yeah. Therapy, therapy provides medication and treatment. This is not treatment. This is going to show you how to get yourself through losses for the rest of your life, because unfortunately they're going to happen.
Right.
And I'm so glad I learned how to do this, because the things that came up in my life after that, had I not known how to do grief recovery for myself, I promise you I would not be here. I would have probably tried to take myself out, because things got really bad. Like I went through some things like, what is going on? But what held me steady was knowing grief recovery. Okay. And so I want to give you the formal definition.
This one?
She keeps scooting.
Stay this way. Yeah. Go over, little mom.
So
she good right there. All right.
We
good.
The formal definition that you would see on, because there is a website, Grief Recovery Method website. Grief is a normal and natural emotional response to change or loss of any kind: death, divorce, moving, financial changes, health changes, relationship changes, and on and on. Grief is also the result of unmet hopes, dreams, and expectations, and the loss of intangible concepts such as safety, the loss of trust, the loss of security, the loss of respect, faith, and hope. Grief is universal. All of us have experienced grief throughout our lives as a result of many changes and losses, but we are not well prepared to really handle, manage, or recover from the emotional impact which result from these changes and losses. So grief recovery is an action program. It's a step-by-step process for unlocking and respecting the emotional experience of our grief, both the immediate and presenting grief issues and those that may have been holding us captive for years. Often the most recent presenting loss is actually made more difficult by related experiences from our past, which were not recognized or addressed at the time, adding extra weight to that resulting from the current loss. Does that make sense? So when you have a loss, but you didn't deal with anything before, it actually may be more painful or a little bit more harder to deal with, because you already have a bunch of stuff on your shoulders that you've never gotten rid of. So you're now more susceptible to suicidal ideations. You're more susceptible to depression and violence and anger and all these other things, not knowing how to ask for help.
What they say, the straw like that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, that's usually the straw that breaks the camel's back, because you get so used to carrying this weight, you don't even know it's there.
And the crazy thing about grief recovery, I would say, is that when you go back, one of the things, one of the processes of it is you go back to your first ever loss that you can remember.
Yes.
And then you travel down this timeline, and it's like shit that you didn't even initially remember, like, comes to you, and you like, oh my God, like this did happen and that happened. And a lot of the times, what I've known during my grief recovery journey is that a lot of traumatic things that happened in my childhood tied to those same people and situations in my adulthood.
You start to see a
pattern.
It's
like, it was a pattern.
And you saw how those traumatic events in your childhood was literally shaping you, but you
you
couldn't see it that way.
Yeah.
Until you actually looked at it on that timeline, you're like, whoa. And then you handle those one-on-one relationships together as well. That timeline, you do a timeline on an actual person as well. And what it does is it keeps the relationship in perspective, because all relationships are unique.
Right.
No relationship is all bad. No relationship is all good.
Right.
And so the timeline helps you to keep it in perspective so that when you do complete your emotion with that loss, it's real. It's in reality. So we make you list the good things, we make you list the bad things. So you can keep it in perspective, But it's not easy.
And I think grief recovery is a great way to start that process of healing the childhood trauma. For me, I think that's a great way because, like you said, you kind of put stuff in perspective. You kind of learn, like, okay, this why I'm that way. Like, this is why I react to this. This is why I react to that. And it's like, huh?
So it's like, now that I know, what can I do differently?
Right. How can I address this? And so, I mean, for me, I would say it's a good place to start because it's like the things, like I said, some things you may not even remember, but subconsciously it's there.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're acting on it. But when you going through a process like this and you gotta think back and now shit gotta come to the surface. And now you like, oh my God, like this is why, like you said, you brought the example about the men.
Yeah.
A lot of men was introduced to women as just a object to have pleasure from. So that's why a lot of men have problems with cheating. That's why men chase that. They chase that thrill, that adrenaline, that
you ever
way
heard
of life.
The saying, when a person tries a drug for the first time, when that first hit will always be the best hit. The subsequent hits will never be like that first one. You ever heard somebody say that?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. That first feeling will never be like that original feeling he got when he was a kid. And this is what he's going to continue to chase, that first one, until he realizes it's gone. That will never.
No, you will never get that.
You know what I'm saying? So.
Yeah, well, we coming to the end of the show, but my last question to you would be, if someone is out here listening and they're still hurting from childhood trauma, what type of advice would you give them? What would you say to them to get them started, or to just, put something in perspective for them?
You got to have courage. It takes courage. It does. You can attest to it. Honestly, did you get to a point where you felt like, I can't do this? I don't want to do this. Did you feel like that?
I did. I was like, on the journey, I did actually. I got to a point where I was like, man, this shit getting hard.
Yeah.
Like,
But
this
you
is
had to
getting
have
hard. But I
courage.
had to push through it because I knew that if I didn't, I was gonna be in the same mind frame, the same mind state, the same emotional state.
Yeah.
Like,
So you just have to just be ready. Like, okay, you have to have a conversation with yourself. I have to go back to some places that I really never wanted to go back to in my mind. Am I okay with that? How important is that for me? What is, if I clear myself of this, what is the benefit to my life? And you have to sit down and figure out what you want out of it. Do you want to have more harmonious relationships? Do you want to make the relationship with your children better? Do you just want to be a better person? Do you want to help others? Maybe you're hurting, but you feel like, I just feel like I need to help some people. Then we got to make sure you get your vessel in order first.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you for coming out. Real quick, where they can find you at?
So my website is currently being built. Thank goodness. Yay. Right now on Instagram, Golden Keys Life Coaching LLC.
Yeah.
Or just on Facebook under my name, April Owens.
Okay.
My life coaching business is being worked on. I'm really excited about what's going on, so I'm kind of holding off some of my platforms right now.
Yeah.
But for now, Instagram, Golden Keys Life Coaching LLC, or just April Owens on Facebook. I drop gems on Facebook too.
All the time. YouTube too. Put that out there. So, all right, man. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. We hope we was able to help some of you guys today or put something in perspective. And as always, we out y'all face.